إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة. Meaning God, truly God, has purchased from the believers their persons and their property, that paradise might be theirs. And we've seen in the beginning how he interpreted this as saying, or God inviting us to sell him the property we now hold in trust so that he may keep it for us. And let it not be destroyed for no purpose. We read this. After the wars, which means here worldly transience, as he explains later, are over, I will return. So God is telling us, I will return it to you in a better condition than before. I'll regard the trust as your property and pay you a high price for it. As for the machinery and the tools in the workshop, and we saw what the tools were, in this case, for instance, the intellect, the tongue, the eye, all kinds of faculties that we have, they will be used in my name and at my workbench, in my name, in God's name. But the price and the fee for their use shall be increased 1,000-fold. You will receive, it means we will receive, the believers who take that decision, make that decision, and actually sell the trust back to God. They will receive all the profit that accrues. You are indigent and resourceless and unable to provide the cost of these great tasks. So let me assume the provision of all expenses and equipment and give you all the income and the profit. You shall keep it until the time of demobilization, which is the moment of death, of departure from this world. So see the 5 ways in which you shall profit. Now, if you don't sell the property, if we don't sell the property back to God, you can see that no one is able to preserve what he possesses, and you too will lose what you now hold. It will go for nothing, and you will lose the high price I offer. The delicate and precious tools and scales, the precious metals waiting to be used, will also lose all value. You will have the trouble and concern of administering and preserving, but at the same time, you will be punished for betraying your trust. So see the 5 ways in which you may lose. So he's saying, if you sell the property, the trust back to God, you will, there are 5 profits. And if you don't, not only you lose, there will be no profits, but there are losses at the same time. And we stopped at the 3rd profit, where we were told the value of each limb and each sense is increased 1,000-fold. And the intelligence, which really is the intellect, because the original is aql. Aql is the intellect, the faculty of reasoning, is, for example, like a tool. If you do not sell it to God Almighty, but rather employ it for the sake of the soul here, for the sake of the ego, or you can say for the sake of the lower self, the self that is not yet awakened, the heedless, mindless self, it will become an ill-omened, noxious, and debilitating tool that will burden your weak person with all the sad sorrows of the past and the terrifying fears of the future. It will descend to the rank of an inauspicious and destructive tool. It is for this reason that a sinful man will frequently resort to drunkenness or frivolous pleasure in order to escape the vexation and injuries of his intellect. But if you sell your intellect to its true owner, so like it's a little bit of a contradiction because we're selling it, but actually we're selling it to the true owner and employ it on his behalf. That's what it means actually, because it's given to us at trust. So employ it on his behalf, employ it for the purpose of his creation, employ it in the way you are told to employ, because we don't know what the purpose of our intellect or our various faculties are. So when we realize that we don't know, then we will be ready to ask for guidance and receive the guidance and practice it and live according to that guidance. Then if when you employ it on his behalf, then it will become like the key to a talisman, unlocking the infinite treasures of compassion and the vaults of wisdom that creation contains. It will thus rise to being a dominical guide. Here, dominical is Rabbani, a guide to inspired by the Rabb, by the sustainer, preparing its owner, it means the human person, for eternal bliss. So it becomes a tool for eternal bliss. And then he gives other examples. He says, to take another example, the eye is one of the senses, a window through which the spirit looks out on this world. If you do not sell it to God Almighty, but rather employ it on behalf, again, the soul here can be misunderstood. In the original, it's like if you employ it on behalf of the mindless self, let's say, by gazing upon a handful of transient, impermanent beauties and sceneries, it will sink to the level of being a pander to lust. And lust here, shahwa, it's really desires, but lower desires. The desires of the heedless self. So it's not only lust. And the concupiscent soul, but if you sell it, if you sell the eye to the all-seeing maker and employ it on his behalf and within the limits traced by him, then your eye will rise to the rank of the reader of the great book of being. A reader here is important because read in the name of your sustainer who creates is the first revelation in the Quran. So it will rise, the eye will rise to the rank of a reader of the great book of being and witness to the miracles of dominical art. Again, dominical means pertaining to rububiyah, to sovereignty. A blessed bee sucking on the blossoms of mercy in the garden of this globe. Yet another example is that of the tongue and the sense of taste. If you do not sell it to your wise creator, but employ it instead on behalf of the soul, again, the soul, the mindless, heedless self, and for the sake of the stomach, because when it is the heedless self, the sense of the tongue and the sense of taste will be limited to the working for the sake of the stomach. It sinks and declines to the level of a gatekeeper at the stable of the stomach, a watchman at its factory. But if you sell it to the generous provider, the sense of taste contained in the tongue will rise to the rank of a skilled overseer of the treasuries of divine compassion, a grateful inspector in the kitchens of God's eternal power. So look well, O intellect, see the difference between a tool of destruction and the key to all being. and look carefully, O eye, see the difference between an abominable pander and a learned overseer of the divine library, and taste well, O tongue, see the difference between a stable doorkeeper or a factory watchman and the superintendent of the treasury of God's mercy. Compare all other tools and limbs, it means faculties, to these, and then you will understand that in truth, the believer acquires a nature worthy of paradise, and the unbeliever or the heedless, the heedless person who thinks he's a believer will acquire a nature conforming to hell. The reason for each of them attaining his respective value is that the believer, by virtue of his belief, uses the trust of his creator on behalf of the creator, on his behalf, and within the limits traced out by the creator. Whereas the unbeliever betrays the trust and employs it for the sake of the instinctual soul, here, the instinctual soul is a nafs al-ammara, the evil commanding soul, the mindless, heedless soul that has not yet reached awareness. So this is the third prophet. Maybe we can stop here and maybe you can share what you understand or what you feel, if you have questions as well, but also what do you feel when you read this, when you hear this? I'll share also, but I want to share after you do, inshallah.
Dr. Yamina, I had a question about that one part where it says, if you sell the eye to the all-seeing maker. I mean, you could also look at that. I thought when you said that it was the eye, like eye-ness, or the eye.
Oh no, the eye, the seeing eye.
Yeah, and here it's the seeing eye. So are they interchangeable, maybe?
Well, the two different uses, each one is associated with the attitude of the eye, the eye-ness.
Right, okay.
But it's not true only for the eye, it's true for all our faculties.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Could I say something, Yamina, honey?
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Sausan speaking. Inshallah, everybody is doing well, and inshallah, you all have enjoyed a nice Eid in the midst of this strange situations, inshallah. So, concerning feelings, Yamina, I think by the time you concluded your reading, I had two main feelings. One is a sense of humbleness. We feel like we are such a grandeur creation, etc. But sometimes we owe it all to the self, with all the powers of the sensories we have. So the more we think of the multitude of gifts within every sense, not just the five senses, but much more, when it is connected to the God, I feel so much humbled by the gifts bestowed on us. The other feeling, by the time you finished reading, I kept saying, oh my gosh, how guilty I am. I mean, how many times we are heedless. I am heedless. And so the reminders, of course, are amazingly valuable. But just to see how vulnerable we are in the sense of how thankful are we for those gifts that we have? Do we see the true gifter all the time? Are we thankful enough, etc.? So may Allah forgive us all. That's all what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Susan. I'll get back to it, especially the second one, our being in ghafla, in heedlessness. Anyone else, inshallah?
What comes to my mind is this proposal of two paths.
Yes.
One being us using these senses and faculties as we do, which means as without this conscious training or discipline, just kind of using them in a way that I see the image of like a driver driving a car, constantly burning oil, constantly on the move, just working so hard and using things almost aimlessly, it seems, is like the first option. And I see the second option of selling, whether it's the intelligence or the eye, just because those are the two paragraphs that I have in front of me now. If the image of the car driver, it's like being driven, instead of seeing yourself as this constant driver that needs to go somewhere, and then being driven, like your intelligence will be driven for you, and then you will kind of, it just seems like so much easier and less effortful, less of a burnout, instead of your mind going in overdrive, trying to employ itself on behalf of itself, problem solving on its own. The second option seems like, on, you know, in the name of intelligence, being driven or guided. And it seems so simple, like like the word key and talisman is such a beautiful analogy, because it's that simple. It's a matter of just the initial perception on first, I guess, contact of just being aware, and then just changing that perception. Then all of a sudden you're not this someone burning out, you're someone that's eyes are being guided and intelligence is being guided. And it just seems like such a more pleasant, easy, freeing, relieving way.
He actually talks in other parts, not in the sixth word, about the ease in following, in submitting and surrendering to divine guidance. Yeah, definitely there is much ease. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'll share, and meanwhile, if anything comes to your mind, please just you're welcome to share, to ask questions, and the more you share, the more all of us benefit, inshallah. In general, not only in the sixth world, but in various places, and most of the, what he calls like each risala, each is like some reflections on one or few ayat, passages from the Quran. So Imam Nursi, rahimahullah, he repeatedly explains that there are two ways of being in the world. And the first one is being aware. So always, as I always say, the key is awareness, because if there is no awareness, even if we read and learn, get the information, it won't mean anything, because unless we are aware that information won't become ours, it won't be internalized. So it will remain out there as if it has nothing to do with me. So the key word is awareness. And of course, there is also the choice. The intention means if I make the intention to choose something, because I may be aware and I have no intention to follow that path, even if I am aware that is a path of ease, a path that leads to paradise, to eternal happiness. We've been set free. That's the mystery of free will. So he explains repeatedly, he emphasizes that there are two ways. Of course, he is getting all this from the wisdom of the Quran, and in some places it's explicit and in some others it's implicit. So there are two ways of being in the world. And the first one is to be aware that we are vulnerable and powerless beings. So he calls it ajz and faqr. Powerless, and that we have needs, but needs that are beyond our, we cannot take care of those needs ourselves. We are powerless to take care of them. And to embrace, so not only to be aware of this, because we can be aware and reject this reality or fight it and not accept it. But the first one is when we are aware of this reality, of our vulnerability, our powerlessness, and our needs, and embrace this vulnerability and acknowledge with gratitude our dependence on our maker, our sustainer, our Rabb. And the second way of being is to be in denial of our vulnerability. For various reasons, but it all boils down to not making peace with that reality. It means deep down, whatever the level of our awareness, we know somehow that we are vulnerable and powerless. But if we have not made peace with this reality, if we have not consciously resolved this issue and made the choice to surrender and submit, then we may prefer, most of the time we are in that state, to remain in denial of this reality and struggle with this reality of vulnerability and powerlessness. And we attempt to make up for it by becoming more self-sufficient. And of course, there is no way we can be self-sufficient vis-a-vis our maker and creator. So all kinds of self-sufficiency in the horizontal realm cannot make up for our dependence on God, for our breathing here and now, for our very existence, our very life. And what is important is that in both cases, the reality is the same. Our reality doesn't change because of the choice we make. We are vulnerable, we are powerless. We depend on someone else sustaining our breathing, sustaining our life with all its faculties. It means we do not choose to be vulnerable and powerless. We only choose how to respond to this reality. This needs to be clear, because when we are, in that state of confusion, when there is no the clarity of awareness, then the heedless self tries to show it as if when you surrender and submit to God, you are becoming powerless, but actually when you are not, as if you are not powerless. There is no such a thing. Or that when you worship God, you are a worshiper, but when you don't worship God, you are not a worshiper. No, we are always worshiping something. We are always adoring something. We are always asking for help from something. We are always longing for something. The only difference is the object of worship. Either it is the true object of worship, God, the maker, the sustainer, or false objects of worship. So the first way corresponds to the heart and the soul. Here, let's call it spirit, since in this translation it's using soul in a different way. The spirit, the ruh, so it's the qalb and ruh. It is corresponds to the heart and the spirit's mode of being. And the second is the lower self, the mindless self mode of being. And this mindless, heedless self is when it is purified from its illusions, or like it's a process, the more it is purified from its illusions of self-sufficiency, and the more the faculties we realize that we need guidance on how to use our faculties, and the more we become ready to entrust our faculties to our maker, their maker. And we become more ready to consciously employ them in the name of the creator, means following his guidance, following his wisdom. Then all different faculties start to display a variety of worship, because they were all given to us, each one has its own form of worship. They start fulfilling their innate worship, and they become means to know God and thank him and praise him. And then the seeker of God, the one who travels this path consciously, gradually transforms our whole being transforms. The more we make those choices each day, each situation, we take that, we make that conscious choice, and we start using our, what does it mean that we use our life? We use our various faculties in a particular way, then our whole being transforms, and we enter a new mode of being and of knowing under the leadership of the heart and the soul, which means the lower the ego, the heedless, mindless self gets weaker and weaker, and it's not in control anymore. And this transformation affects all our human senses as they start fulfilling their the purpose of their creation, which is to worship, to know and worship God alone. And in this sixth word, we saw how the intellect, to which the faculty of reasoning is ascribed, is a trust from our maker. And of course, this area is addressed to the believers, which means they already know, they have already confirmed that these faculties are being given to us, they are trust. If we are not sure, no problem. We go back and start from the beginning. It means our belief is still incomplete. It means when the ayah is saying to the believers, it is not addressing me yet totally. It's not that it's addressing the believers. If my belief is incomplete, I don't get the address. I feel like, how do I sell back? They are not, they're mine. So I have to start from the beginning and ask myself, Are they mine? What is mine anyway? Is this life mine? Is this seeing? And here there was reasoning, seeing and tasting. Are they mine right here and now? And it's okay, wherever we find ourselves, we just stop there, resolve the issue and move forward. And so we were told that the faculty of reasoning is a trust from our maker. If it is not sold back to the maker, and meaning it's used in his name, we'll get back to that, then it won't be able to fulfill its purpose of being, and it will be, not only it will be ruined, at least at the end we will die and everything will end, but it will also cause our ruin, our misery as well, by furthering our mindlessness. And not only furthering our mindlessness, but it will be, for instance, when mindless, this is an example that he gives in another place, when we are mindless, through the use of the mind, we can deduce, for instance, we experience a separation, and it's very painful, either now or in the past. Through the power of the mind, we deduce that, oh, separation is painful, everything is passing, there will be many other separations in the future. So before those multitude future separations actually happen, we start feeling the pain of those separations. Why? Because we have the power to reason and deduce. And so now, if we don't find eternity, if separation is the end of everything, then there is no cure and no healing to that pain. And now the intellect became a tool for suffering and misery, for instance. And in contrast, we are told, if the intellect is employed mindfully in God's name, it will unlock the infinite treasures of compassion and the meanings of wisdom in the universe. We did go through many times during the receiving Nur reflections on how to use the mind or the power of reasoning with the heart rather than with the ego, with the mindless ego, and how that leads to the discovering the beautiful names of God. And we can go through some examples at the end if we have time. So what is important is, instead of being a harmful tool that we constantly try to avoid, that's why we try to numb our senses. Most people we don't want to think, or we think about things that are not relevant to our existential purpose in life or existential questions. We avoid those because they seem to always lead to suffering and pain. Then if we use the intellect in the way it was supposed to use, it rises to the station of divine guide, Murshid Rabbani, preparing its owner for eternal bliss. So there is a huge difference. One is misery and suffering, and one is becoming aware of divine internal bliss while still here in this world. And then he gives the example of the eye, the seeing eye. And the eye, we're told, is a window through which the spirit, the ruh, looks onto this world. Can you imagine? We don't see with the eye, we see through the eye. Of course, we see through the eye when we live at the level of the heart and the spirit. But if we are in a state of mindlessness, so I want to emphasize the fact that these two attitudes, or Sarah called them two paths, are at the beginning. The difference between them is a difference of choice. Either living mindlessly or mindfully. Living mindfully is a choice. When we don't make the choice to live mindfully, by default, we are in state of mindlessness. So we cannot say that I'm not responsible for my mindlessness. I am, because I have the capacity and the potential to be mindful, but I did not choose it. So not choosing it is also by default a kind of choice. So we have to be careful about this, because we can pause and make the choice to live mindfully and consciously. So when we are conscious, then the eye, we become aware that the eye is a window through which the spirit looks onto the world. Because now, when we are aware, the more awareness, the more we live from the spirit. But when we are not, when we are mindless, then it is employed on behalf, it becomes a tool of the mindless, deluded self. And it will gaze, he says, on transient and impermanent beauties. It means, and sink to the level of being a servant to the lower desires, instead of contemplating the cosmos and being a witness to the miracles of divine art. And it's the same for the power of taste. Either it's for shoveling stuff into the stomach after a brief enjoyment, or when we sell the sense of taste to the generous provider, then it rises to the rank of a skilled and grateful overseers of the treasuries of divine compassion. That means that even though our enjoyment of the food will be still brief and passing, the food is not suddenly going to become eternal, but it will, that transient, short-lived enjoyment of delicious food will enable us, will become a window onto eternal names of God, and it will give us a glimpse of eternal light, of eternal delight. And the undying mercy, the beauty of the generous one, that's the delight of being in the presence of experiencing the eternal mercy and beauty of the generous provider. And you can add other beautiful names. Then we'll start to love God, to know God and love him with his beautiful names, instead of being stuck in the delicious food itself. So we'll appreciate the food as a mirror reflecting the beautiful names of God. And we will be able to confirm the Shahada, La ilaha illallah. There is no deity, nothing worth worshipping, nothing worth appreciating and being attached to and adoring except God the only source of what we need, the only source of what we love and long for. And not that here, the selling of the trust back to God and using our faculties consciously in the name of God is itself a form of worship. It transforms our seemingly mundane daily activities like eating, seeing, reasoning into, and you can take it for everything, walking, into means of knowing God and worshiping Him. And what I mean is what's going here. Let's stop here because what's going on here is actually very, very, very important. And let me explain a little more. Again, my understanding is based on the teaching of Imam Nursi. My study of the Quran is based on his approach because it doesn't have to be that he went through each verse ayah by ayah, text by word by word, but because he provides a particular approach to the Quran that is really, and to the Quran and to life, because, and you will see that it's taken from the Quran. I believe so. I personally, all I know, even reading from other books, I apply that approach. So before we learn to become aware of our, let's call it vertical connection to God, it seems to us by default, all of us, that's why it seems like it's universal, but it's not universal. It seems to us like we have some kind of horizontal relationships with the world, meaning with things, with people, with anything that comes to your mind, anything created. However, as we start questioning the nature of our relationship, those so-called horizontal, seemingly horizontal relationship, we become more and more aware that those relationships are actually there is no such a thing as horizontal relationship. They're actually a delusion. And they are the delusion we are in when we forget our maker and sustainer. Either we forget our maker or we never got to know him in the first place. And I believe that for most of us, I'm talking about Muslims primarily, but it includes everyone, believers, let's say in general, believers in God. Most of us, we don't know God as our Rabb, our sustainer here and now. So no wonder we forget about him. But some of us, we did get those glimpses, we did get close to him, and then we forget. So there are two possibilities. While in this delusion it means while we are in disconnection, we are unaware of our relationship or connection with God, with our God as our maker here and sustainer here and now. We start perceiving the world and things and events and everything as existing in themselves, things. This is a flower, this is a tree, this is a house, this is me, that's it. It means they are what we see and touch and nothing more. It seems so. And that's why the relationship seems to be horizontal. It means if I get some benefit, it seems to be coming from that thing. I'm tasting some delicious food. The delicious food seems to be giving me that taste and that joy. But when you start questioning, what does unconscious, unliving food know about me and my, and what enjoys the food is not my physical body. It's my heart, my soul, my spirit. What is it to do with the food? How does it know? So of course, it's all about the questioning starts when we start becoming aware. And the questioning is something we learn step by step in the Quran. So it seems like what we see and touch is what is, that's it. And there's no more as if. So to understand what's going on, let's take the example of written language. It's again an example that Imam Nursi gives. You can find some of it in the 12th word, for instance. So imagine a person who is illiterate. When they see writing, what do they see? They see shapes. And it's correct. What they see is shapes. However, at the same time, although it is correct when they say these are shapes, it is correct, and at the same time, it is very serious distortion. Why? Like, how come it's a distortion? Because let's say it's a very important message, a message of crucial information. Can you imagine? What they're looking at are not random shapes. They are shapes, yes, but they are intentional signs. Those shapes have been assigned meanings. It means now they are signs. They are written, meaningful messages. And those shapes are letters and words expressing meaning, and that meaning sometimes can be vital. So you see how when they are saying it's shapes, although it is correct, it's so incomplete that it is such a huge distortion because they are missing the purpose of the creation of those shapes, which is the meaning that they convey onto us. And so in the same way, what seems like random things and events in the world to the heedless, they are actually, as we are told repeatedly in the Quran, they are meaningful ayat, they are meaningful signs, they are messages, they're bearing meaningful messages from God. They are created for particular purposes. They are not just things. They are things with meanings. That's a huge difference. And in Receiving Nur, we've repeatedly emphasized the importance of ayat in the creation, the concept of ayah, of a sign, of something bearing meaning in the creation, and of course in the Quran, because it is through the Quran that we learn the meaning of ayat in the creation. And therefore, we also understand the importance of becoming literate in the art of reading in the name of our sustainer who creates, which is the first revelation in the Quran, and it is a command, read. It is in the imperative. Read, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Rabb, your sustainer who creates. And it is through the reading of the signs, the reading of the ayat, that we become more and more aware of our connection to God as our Rabb. And then what ensues from those messages is what is going to reformat all our relationship with ourselves and with the rest of the world. And here it's important, I think everyone got it, but just for the sake of, I feel these things need repetition because the ghafla paradigm grows through repetition. It's what we, once we know a reality, we need to remember it again and again until it it is anchored in our heart and it becomes our reality. Otherwise, we forget it because there is something else that is anchored instead. So there are two aspects of what's going on here, of this phenomenon. When we are reading the ayat, the signs in the creation, of course, under the guidance of the signs in the Quran, we are using our faculties, our intellect, our eyes, our tongues, and other faculties in the name of God, in his names. For instance, seeing, he said, when it is used in behalf of the seeing one, he is the seeing one. When I'm aware that he is the seer, not me, everything changes. So when we are reading the ayat, we're actually using our faculties in the name of God and fulfilling the purpose of the creation, of their creation, our creation, and that's our worship too. And when we are using our faculties, Bismillah, in the name of God consciously, when we make the choice and the decision to sell them back to God, that's part of the surrender, that it's not mine, I am not the seer, I'm using it in the name of the seer. Then we start also reading, we are enabled into the art of reading the ayat. So they go together, they're like the two aspects of the same activity. Now here, again, reading the ayat is taught to us in the Quran. By the ayat here, I have in mind primarily the ayat in the creation, but of course, I cannot read the ayat of the creation without reading the ayat in the Quran, because they are going to guide me into reading the ayat in the creation. So I'm repeating because it's not always obvious, it's not always clear. Because actually, most of us, talking about Muslims primarily, we don't know how to read the ayat. No one taught us how to read the ayat. Actually, most of us haven't reflected on the meaning and significance of the ayat. Even we know maybe the dictionary meaning, it means signs, but what does it mean? Why is it important? What does it have to do with me? And most of us don't study the Quran seriously. And many of us who do study the Quran seriously, we don't read it together with the ayat in the world. We confine ourselves to studying the text as though it's like we have a map. The Quran is in a way like a map, and the map says, take 3 steps ahead and then turn left, and we never get up and take 3 steps and turn left. We're saying, oh, the Quran says, take 3 steps and turn left and you will find the treasure. Yeah, but then go. It says, look at the water, at the rain coming. It is God who is bringing it down. And that's what we do when we read the Quran together. Is it true? We go look through the window. It's raining. It doesn't seem like it's God who is sending the water. It seems to us that it's coming down itself. And then that's where reading the ayat starts. Is it true? Which one is true? Is my perception true, or is what I see, can I rely on what I see? When I see in the horizon, things seem to be close to each other, or like a light in the city and a star seems to be very close. Can I rely on that? Or do I have to question that perception? And in the Quran, we are invited to question our perception, because often it clashes with what we are told. And how can I confirm the truth of that ayah again and again, the message that it is God who sends the winds, It is God who sends the rain. And I look around and I don't see, and I see as if, it seems to me as if it's happening on its own. So we need to pause and listen to the guidance of the Quran. And unfortunately, most of us, we don't read the Quran together with the ayat in the world. And we may have sometimes some epiphany from time to time where an ayah or a passage in the Quran suddenly shed lights or has a meaning that is relevant to me in a particular area of my life. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how do we make this more systematic, this reading of the ayat in the universe, in the world, more systematic? How do we become more proficient in the language of the ayat in the world as taught in the Quran? And note that the meaning of the ayat in the Quran, as well as in the world, is revealed to us. I'm not saying that we will somehow grasp the ayat. No, it is always revealed unto us, but it is not revealed randomly. It is revealed when we are ready to receive those messages, which means we need to do the work to prepare ourselves for receiving those messages, inshallah. So reading the ayat, I'm repeating because I feel that it's so important, like it's of paramount importance, is crucial in being a Muslim because it's necessary in practicing the Shahada. As I always say, and Aliyah also repeats that too, Shahada is not repeating the words. I cannot say I witness that there is nothing worth worshiping except God when I have not witnessed it. That would be a lie. If I am saying it, yes, we will say it, but that saying is supposed to remind me of my own experience. So each time I say it, I'm reminded of its reality, of its truth, of my experience of that reality. So we need to actually practice the witnessing. And the witnessing, we can only practice it through reading of the ayat, which leads to knowledge of God, to knowing God with his beautiful names, and then loving God, not the world, not things and everything else, all creatures, all his creation will become like mirrors reflecting his beautiful name. So we will love them for his sake, in his name, and not for themselves and in themselves, like not in disconnection to God. So reading the ayat is directly connected to the process of the Shahada. The first part, La ilaha, there is no deity, nothing worth worshipping, nothing worth being God, starts with the conscious questioning of our taken for granted assumptions about reality, about what we think is reality, about the things around us. And that means when we start questioning them, it means what seems to be things sitting there on themselves, by themselves, independently of anything else, suddenly, when we start questioning them, our perception of them start changing. For instance, we are told in the Quran, look around, things, they change, they perish, they have a beginning, they have an end, they are born, they die. What does it mean? It means they are being brought into existence. Someone is sustaining them into existence. Someone is taking them from one form into another. It means they have a maker, a creator, a provider, a sustainer. And then the question is, who is he? Who is our maker and sustainer? So our focus was the thing itself. Now it became something more important, because those things, we were stuck in them because of the qualities we saw in them. But lo and behold, if they keep changing, if they are transient, those qualities cannot belong to them. They are only mirroring, reflecting someone else's qualities. And now we look for the source that we long for. And of course, being limited beings, we cannot comprehend our Creator with our mind. So the questioning is the beginning, and it's a questioning that happens with the heart. But even though this questioning, this reasoning is going to take us only so far, it's only the La ilaha. These things are not deities, they are not gods, they are not the source of anything, they are not worth worshipping. But after that, because we are limited, we cannot comprehend the unlimited, the infinite. So we cannot comprehend the infinite Creator. We can deduce that He is infinite. He cannot, that anything finite cannot be the Creator, like Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so, and when we, what do we mean by infinite? We mean something or someone who is not like this, who transcends this. But after that, we stop. And the illallah is something that is done unto us, that is revealed unto us, because it's beyond our comprehension. So how do we get to know God? He makes Himself known to us. He reveals Himself unto us. When we are ready to receive, this is very important, there is work to be done. We have to do the La ilaha properly. Otherwise, we won't receive the illallah, because we will be following the small ilahs, the small idols, the small gods in our mindlessness and heedlessness, in our ghafla, and ignore the ignorance that comes together with ghafla. And that's why here, reflecting, contemplating, meditating is so very important. Because at this stage, once we do the refuting the false gods, when we question them and we realize that they are not the source of anything, that they are only mirroring, they are mirrors or channels to an infinite source, now we need to pause and reflect and contemplate and meditate. And the more we reflect, the more we realize our limitedness, and the more we become ready, we become more humble, and we become ready to listen for guidance and to wait for God to disclose Himself unto us. And that's where the illallah starts happening. And now we're ready to receive the answers from Him. And when we patiently listen in silence, as we are told in the Quran, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنِ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَانصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. When the Quran is read, hearken unto it and listen in silence, so that you might be graced with rahmah. So when we listen in silence, when we abstain from making up meanings for trying to understand the infinite, the one that is beyond our understanding, then that's where He reveals Himself unto us slowly through His eternal, beautiful names. And that's why that reflecting, meditating, pausing, listening is so important. But of course, we need to also be doing the active questioning, so that our heart is satisfied that none of the things around us is the source of anything. They do not exist on their own. They are put there on purpose they are messengers, they are messages. And their messages, they are ayat, they are bearing messages from beyond. Those messages will also be revealed onto us when we listen to the messages. They cannot be revealed onto us when there is still part of us that is attached to them, because we have not done our work properly, because we still have a delusion about the world. And that delusion, of course, stems from the delusion about ourselves. I'll stop here.
Dr. Yamina, if I could just share a connection that came to me when you were talking about
Please do, yes.
the words overseer of the treasuries of divine compassion. That's here on the first paragraph of the screen. And then a grateful inspector in the kitchens of God's eternal power. Both point to this, and I like the word that you used, enabling, that comes to the one that does this work. And this just reminded me of the homework of the breathing meditation, because I feel like it's the easiest way for all of us to put this into practice, because when we put ourselves in a position to have space and time dedicated to watching breathing happening unto us, then we become the overseers or the watchers of the breath.
Yes.
And that's one level of tasting this heightened awareness or state of being that the Quran and Imam Said Nursi is inviting us to. So I think that's such a great homework assignment, because then through the watching of the breathing, you can watch your thoughts and what your thoughts are doing. And because that distance, like we said last week, there's a distance now because you're the watcher and not the thinker, then you can start to ask questions to the thoughts and see, is it really true? Or what does this point to? And then discover an ayah, inshallah, because you have, and I like the words that he used, skilled overseer, because skilled implies training and discipline and practice in order to be skilled at something. And it takes time. So I just wanted to, again, sort of insert this constant reminder of breathing and how it comes into play with what you're saying, because it's just such a practical tip. And I find now, after trying to do it at least once a day, today I found myself hearing the thoughts playing in my mind like a record. And I found myself getting worked up, and I was just so happy to be aware that of that little distance that I found myself with these thoughts. And then I found myself getting worked up, and then I quickly set my timer for 20 minutes so I can spend time there and listen and see and ask. And then I found a discovery of what the thoughts are saying and what the feelings are saying and what it means, and just channel them all in a prayer, and then kind of just run away from the circle of the heedless driver burning himself out aimlessly. That's all.
Thank you for sharing. Here in the text, something very important is when he talks about the tongue, he's saying, if you sell it to the generous provider. And when he's talking about the eye, he also said something. What was it when he talked about the eye? It was a name of God. Each time there was a name of God. Let me go back to the eye. The eye is one of the senses to God Almighty. If you sell to the all-seeing maker, you see the all-seeing maker, the moment I say the all-seeing maker, then I am not the seer anymore. And that's what I need to reflect on. Because if he's the all-seer, So if I am seeing and you are seeing and the other one is seeing, and some animals see even more than us, like they're, then he's not the all seeing. So when I sell it back to the seer, it means you are not the seer, you are not doing the seeing, then everything starts changing from then on. That's where the selling starts, and when that's when the experience of seeing itself starts changing totally. It becomes not simply an experience of seeing one thing as opposed to another, but whatever we see becomes an experience of getting know the seer, at least the seer, through the act of seeing whatever we are looking at. And of course, there is also what we are looking at and its meaning. But now the act of seeing is also a meaningful act. If I don't sell it, it's me seeing, full stop. The cat sees, and everyone sees, and every living thing sees. But when I sell it to the all-seeing maker, then now it is God seeing when I see. Then it will take a long time reflecting and staying in the presence of this seeing. Of course, it is not something that I will grasp and understand through my mind, but it's something that I will imbibe and absorb through and live in its presence with my spirit, and the heart will feel the awe of being in the presence of the seer, and that experience will be a miraculous experience, and seeing becomes what it is. It is a miraculous activity, something that makes the seer known to us here and now. And it's something that connects us to God directly, and therefore to Akhirah as well, here and now. It's something totally amazing. Yes.
Can I ask a question, Yamina, if you don't mind?
Please.
Well, if you recall when you brought the example of the illiterate versus the literate, do these two levels have spectrums within? For instance, could somebody does recognize the letters as letters, not just shapes, yet refuse to follow? And the ayah that comes to my mind, and I can't recall all of it, in the Quran, فَفَكَّرْ ثُمَّ نَظَرْ ثُمَّ when somebody was asked, and he was a well-known reference among the Arabs at the time of the Prophet ﷺ about the Quran, he said, let me think about it. And then he did know it was not qawlu bashar, yet he chose, not to follow. And so that made me think, is there a spectrum within these? Or could we be literate yet choose not to follow the right literary, let's assume, creator, author? Or what do you think of it?
Well, there is the illiterate that does not even know there is language. That will be like the total unbeliever in this case. There is the illiterate that knows there is language but can't read it himself, right? Like most people, when we apply it to the case of the ayat in the creation. Like we know if you are a believer, somehow you know that they are created with meaning, but somehow we are illiterate, we don't read them, and especially when they are related to us and we don't like them, we totally forget that they may have a meaning. And what you are talking about is another level, which is, I don't think the person can read, but knows that he has the potential to read and is unwilling to make the choice. Are you talking about a mudaththir?
I forgot the surah in the Quran, you know that he says that this is not qawlu bashar, and I really forgot. And he describes the Quran, inna lahu la halawa wa inna alayhi la tarawa, etc. The person who was referenced, and he did know that these were actually.
Maybe it's another one. Because
I can't recall the ayah. I could check it next time, inshallah. But it just made me think of that person who did recognize this is not the words of a human being. This is definitely divine. And yet, when the Abu Jahl and others went to, and he was appointed as a judge, he goes against the right answer that he himself knows very well in order to satisfy those people of Quraysh. And so he's referenced in that surah of the Quran. So it made me think of quote unquote stubbornness. And I don't know what you think of it when you know it, but you don't want it. And I don't know if that's part of it.
It's possible. I thought you were referring to Surah Al-Muddathir when it says, إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ. But it's...
Yes. He's the same person.
But it seems like فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ, he is reflecting and meditating and thinking about how to disprove, it seems. فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ.
So in the story that
ثم عبس وبصر. Then it says ثم أدبر واستكبر. Then in the end he turned his back and he استكبر. He became arrogant.
Yeah, exactly, Yamina. So the story, attached to it,
he says فقال إن هذا إلا سحر يؤثر إن هذا إلا قول بشر. So actually he's thinking very hard to prove that this is only the word of a human being.
So, I'll double check the story, and I saw to the attached narrative about the person who said, Inna lahu la halawa wa inna alayhi la tarawa, was the same person who...
That's not in the text.
No. So supposedly this is the story narrated, and this is...
It says he thought very hard and reflected how to refute the Quran, and in the end, he could not find anything, so he's just arrogantly said, no, I'm not going to accept it. And he turned his back and said, wastakbara, like he chose to be arrogant, because he was arrogant from the beginning. And then he said, this is only the word of a mortal human being. It means he was not, from the beginning, he wanted to prove that it was the word of human being, so he could not find anything else. And the key word is istakbara. It means he does not have any intention to find the reality. But we don't have to take that example. We can look at ourselves. When or if we are not proficient in the reading of the ayat, when it is taught in the Quran, we are given all the potential, all the creation, all the world is created to cooperate with us. We have only ourselves to blame, if we can blame. Like, it means we are responsible. And why? And when we look at it, why? It's just because we say, I was not aware. But once we are, if we are not aware at all, you can say maybe, question mark. But once, because we are not still responsible. But the moment we are introduced to the concept, why don't we pursue it Why don't we want to learn? People leave everything and go after something to learn something when they understand its importance. Why don't we do that? Because there is a part of us that still does not want to surrender. And before we surrender to God, our Rabb, here and now, we are unwilling to surrender to the reality that nothing is under our control. We want to be in control ourselves. And like Sarah was saying, and Imam Nursi says it in different ways, when we want to be in control, we are making life very hard on ourselves. We're taking on a burden that we cannot assume. And when we surrender, when we accept, we submit to the reality that we are not in control. It's not like I want to be in control or not. What is under our control is very limited, and I need to only look at that. Then, lo and behold, it's like a huge weight is being taken off our shoulders, and life is much easier than we think it is.
So based on what you say, Yamina, dear, like I'm hearing two words being repeated that could prevent us, which is first the arrogance, in whichever level, I'm sorry, it is.
Yeah, and arrogance is not going around like arrogance means
refusing to surrender, whether it is refusing to accept,
refusing our not being
reality
humble and modest, not accepting our reality, our limitedness.
Exactly. And so if we then go back and think of literacy and illiteracy, and I'm just repeating it because I really love those examples, to be honest. Thank you so much, Yamina. So I'm thinking of Shaitan, for instance. So Shaitan, Iblis, let's say, the one who was in heaven, with Adam and Eve, etc. So he was literate in the sense, I mean, he was very close. I mean, he knows, in fact, God more than we know him. He lived there. He talked to him. More than anyone could think. Yeah, yet the arrogance took him somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. That Shaitan is a potential that we have within us. Otherwise, Shaitan wouldn't be able to communicate with us. We wouldn't fall for him. So we have that potential, which means innately we are acquainted with God. We have been created with with the knowledge of the beautiful names, right? That's how we created. With the teaching that we've been, our spirit is from God, directly from God. And with that, we have been imbued with the knowledge of his beautiful name. So potentially we have that. So even when we have not learned the reading of the names and everything, deep down, we know where it is going to lead.
So it's like we have the software, it's built in.
Exactly. We just need to bring it out. It's like we have the potential to learn any language. We just need to learn the language. But if you bring a cat, you can teach him the language for 20 years. It will never learn the language. It doesn't have that in the fitra. That's why Fatir is translated as creator, but Fatir means the one who creates each thing and each being in a particular fitra, in a particular giving them a particular nature. So it is in human nature to learn language and languages. And just because we don't speak a particular language doesn't mean that we can't learn it. And it's the same with the language of the divine names. We have it within us. We need to just learn it. And it is the same with the reading of the ayat in the creation and in the Quran. We just need to do the work and make the intention and follow up, commit to learning. And when we are not doing that, It's because we have not made the choice. That's also a choice by default.
So a part then of mercy of Allah to make it easier for us, you know, I'm going to go back and borrow Sarah's word of being the driver. We have the software enabled. We all have the apps, features. It's our job to reflect, turn them on, activate them, use them in the right source, not abuse them, etc., in order to continue to read.
Mhm.
Can I also add something that came to me real quick? And I see Aliyat's hands up, but sorry, I don't want to not take time. I don't want to, Aliyat, inshallah, you go next. But with the word activation, it's such a good visual trigger word, because like what came to my mind is that, and it goes with the word enable. So when we first, we're noticing something happening, a new event, you're seeing something, or you're feeling something, or you're thinking something. The first step that we're learning now is to give that trust back to God and realize you don't own it. It's something that comes. It's something that's given and it's not yours. And if we can first do that, that is like the key to the talisman that activates the system. It turns it on now, or like it stops blocking it, because we did that first step. And then once the system is like, once you turn on the laptop, it's now activated, you've turned it on. Now if you just attend to it, the enabling will come through you, the message will come, because you did that first most important step. That's all.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the Qudsi hadith when it says, if you come one step towards me, I come running towards you. Subhanallah. It will be made easy and easy unto us.
Okay, so mine is more of a joke. As you were speaking about the potential, like that we are created with this potential. And the real life funny example that came to me is one of my kids in a French class, on a test where the French teacher had the clock with the different arms of the clock on different parts, so that they would write the the French words in alphabetical, of course, of where the clock is. And my child, one of them, chose to write it actually in numbers. So of course the French teacher had a big red circle around it, and it's like, what did you do? Like, obviously the child knows how to write them, but he or she did not activate like that. Like by default, if you don't activate, what is the teacher asking? It's like, no, the whole thing for them was to finish this test and run out of class. Okay, if I finish this test faster, I'm gonna have more time to play outside, basically. So they did not give themselves a second to think about why would the teacher in 5th grade ask them to write down the numbers? Duh. But this is what we do. So what came to me is when you gave the example of the cat, the cat sees everything like static objects. And then our first level with superficial tawheed, or superficial shahada, we see everything as created objects. So that is like the level above, it's created, but we see them in the book of the universe. And the word, the book of the universe, I realize it's something that I've been still actually in our monthly Ta'arafu, but now I'm realizing that the word book makes it a little bit more static. So still you see things, they're created beautifully, almost as if they're created in the past and you're in awe. But as we're going over Yamina, your book about and the introduction about genuine Tawheed, it's when you see everything, and now through the 6th word, as an ongoing created connections. Everything is about ongoing created connections here and now. in the ongoing, I like this phrase, it's the one that captured my attention, the ongoing great book of being. So I think like my preference of the word book of the universe now is going to change into the ongoing great book of being, because there's ongoing creation of messages.
Ma'am, Nursi calls
our
it also
relationship.
speech.
Say it again.
He calls it speech because speech continuously changes.
Yes. Yeah, but you know, sometimes the word speech like confuses. Like, I think read is an easy one. That's why it was used for, like, you know, it's an easy one to digest, that we're supposed not to see but to read. And then to read, we're trying to read this ongoing great book of being, like, you know, to read the ongoing creation of messages. There's like all these messages are created for me depending on how I feel here and now. And these messages are created through my relationship to the creation and to how does it make me feel inside, like fil afaq wa fi anfusihim. And then if I do it that way, then I have made, like, followed the first order in the Quran, which is Iqra bisma rabbika alladhi khalaq, which is not see but read, you know, everything in the name of your Lord the Creator. That's our Shahada venue. And to use our senses to read the way God gave me the potential to read, like the creation outside and inside as an ongoing great book of being. And I like the word activated. If you don't activate it and you just run, you're just like my child who's like, you know, 5th grade, and you know, instead of writing, you know, the whole, you know, the whole phrase in French, it was just writing the numbers in French. Like, you know, it's a potential you have, but if you don't pause to activate it, you're just gonna miss it totally. Like, and I remember, Yamina, I always say, dhulm, like I keep saying to you, dhulm is like the state of stress that we make ourselves in, and then that aggravates you. And you say, no, Alia, dhulm is that we end up like everything is lost. Your whole life is lost. You end up, you miss being with God in heaven. Everything is lost. So like, you know, so it's not just like, you know, that, you know, if you think of that aggravation, that child failed, you know, the French test, that's a little aggravation. But in our case, like the dhulm is like to miss everything. Jazakallah khair.
May I say something, Alia, honey? I was still waiting for the joke, Alia, dear. Thank you for sharing.
The joke was like my child, like, you know, 5th grader. Like,
but I will tell you, Alia, I'll tell you, I see that in college too. Yamina, of course, has been a teacher, so she may share something. To me, I laugh when a student does that to me, because when I teach the clock in Arabic, you know, the time, a student once did that too. And you know what I did? I gave them, in fact, extra credit. I said, you're very smart. You know what? You did not know how to answer, yet you found a smart way, and you followed supposedly the instructions of the questions, regardless. Next time, I'll be more careful to say write in alphabetical instead of just say what is the time. So to me, I find these as fun ways. So I like your child. Let me know who he or she is.
We'll call you and let you know.
Actually, with Maha, we've been discussing the possibility of having a webinar on the Shahada, and we have different ideas about the format, whether asking people to share what they think about the Shahada. And I was thinking also about the possibility of having the Shahada, meaning La ilaha illallah, also the possibility of learning how to reflect on the creational ayat, the ayat in the creation, and read them by means of the Quranic ayat in order to practice the Shahada. But we were not sure about this second option because that would need more commitment. People would need to do the work, and that means that they will have to be people who feel the need for this, how do you say, education, formation, kind of in our life. So we have not yet come to a conclusion with Maha.
And we're open to all suggestions as well.
That
Yeah.
sounds very practical, mashallah, the training. I think it really just flows from where we are into the training, practical way of living with the teachings. Because it seems like since Ramadan, it's kind of just been this very practical teaching of how to arrive in a way to take the information and turn it into transformation.
Yes, we're always short on the practical. It used to be the opposite, but now, I mean, a lot of people used to be so engrossed in the practical and not the, and missing the whole picture or the bigger picture. And now I think we are short on the practical.
Maybe we're not talking about the same practical.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Probably, yes. But the word practical brings to mind that at least it struck me as, oh, we used to be very engrossed in the practical, but there are, and it's definitely a different level of depth as well.
Yeah, I think it's very different. Yeah.
So I have a comment. Why is it different? And that is because it takes a lot of time. So like Ziba and Mariam were like, we're discussing like for like this Saturday, the upcoming, like how to use sleep as your shahada moment, like how to use you going into sleep and waking up as moments of shahada. And it's been taking several weeks, like, Mariam would say this, and then Ziba would say, oh, it's not clear. Like, then, Mariam would say something, so it takes a lot of discussions just to come up with a clarification for how to use breathing for shahada, how to use sleep for your shahada. So it brings to me what you were saying, Yamina, about you need to prepare yourself. You need to be ready for it, to activate, to activate the program and wait and listen. And then sometimes nothing comes to you and nothing is clear. Then all of a sudden, something becomes clear and makes it easy to explain. So I really like, the ongoing practical shahada ones, they need time, and they need time to focus on simple concepts, how can I use this, whatever I'm doing right now, us being together as our shahada moment, how do we feel, how do I feel connected to everyone speaking? Why do I, when I hear your voices, my heart dances? Why? What is my connection with you? Who wants me to connect with you this way? Why? What is the drive for us to be here instead of doing something else? Why does when something become clear to us, why do we feel this fulfillment? So so all of these are shahada moments that we are experiencing right here and now. But it takes it takes time, and it's experiential. So everyone will have to come and speak up and share more. So that's why it's the goal, but it's the longer route.
Is it exhausting? I was thinking as I'm listening to Dr. Alia speak, how come then we don't do it often? And it occurred to me, could it be draining? Why is it that we get lost?
Definitely elevating. There's no draining about it. It makes you happier and happier. We're so distracted. We want to run. We want to go quickly, and then God tells us we need to slow down. We are always in ajal. We want things to happen quickly, and this takes time. So it
There
needs,
is also in the beginning that ego, that mindless self that wants to be in control, that doesn't want to, that resists submitting to its Rabb. It's still strong enough to keep causing discomfort. So in the beginning, we need that steadfastness and that patience to ignore it, at least for some segments of time, like a child. And the more we practice being present with God, practice the Shahada, the more the other one will not be in charge, and the heart and the soul will be stronger. They will be sustained and nourished, and the other one will become weaker and weaker. So it won't disturb us as much. It won't have the last word on our will. It won't have our free will in its hands anymore. But in the beginning, it's going to be a journey of patience, because it won't be, that part of us won't be happy, and it will want to take over. Like this, it's created to be a servant, but we made it into the master, as Imam Nursi says. And so it says, what's going on here? So it's just a matter of time and patience, and of course, doing the work. And of course, when we are doing the work of listening, we first need to do the active work of La ilaha that we learn in the Quran. And we need to, this is a practice, this is an inner and outer work. Living according, outwardly also, we need to follow the guidance, the divine guidance. And inwardly, we question everything. And then we need that, we will feel the need for that time of silence, that time of listening, because that's where we will have questions, and we know that we can't find the answers, because the questions are not from us, they are from beyond. So we will, when you have a question, when you are hungry, you sit and eat. When you have a burning question, you sit and silently listen. And it is energizing, it gives purpose, it gives meaning, it gives energy, it's healing. Alhamdulillah. It's just that, especially in the beginning, it's hard, it seems hard, because it's outside our zone of comfort. But that zone of comfort is a zone of ghafla, because we have to change that zone of comfort. We have to go out of it.
So Yamina, dear, following Maha's word, drainage or feeling tired or something, then it's just like we do exercises, the first few weeks, gosh, the muscles will be in terrible pain. That pain is a sign that we are in the right way, because later the muscles becomes juicy quicker and things become fine, and we no longer feel the pain when we do that. And in fact, we start going into, more intensive intervals of, and if we stop exercise for a while, then we're going to go back to square one. And it looks to me from your words, and correct me please if I'm wrong, it looks okay if in the beginning we feel overwhelmed or etc., because these are in fact the signs that we are doing the work. And at some point it becomes like what Alia said, we feel the energy, and in fact we feel more exuberant after doing it, etc. Did I understand you correctly?
Inshallah, yeah. If you want, you can take that discomfort of the ego as the pain of the exercising in the first time. It's you can find all kinds of analogies. Yeah.
Amina has a comment too.
Yes.
So sometimes I was remembering something with some work that I had studied, and one of the teachers spoke about baby time. And baby time is when we get very tired. And it was it was trauma work and pre and perinatal work. And it wasn't just taking in information, it was going through a very deep process. And she said, one of the reasons that babies often sleep so much is that it's a way and a time for the nervous system to process all that they're taking in and all the changes that they're going through. And I often find that in my own life, when there's a time that feels like intense learning or deep learning, sometimes I need to sleep. And what I do is just embrace that now and understand that the nervous system, because I live in a body, you know, this is my my turtle shell, this is my home, and that the body needs to process. So it's actually a very kind
Or adapt to the
yes, it needs to learn how to make there's new neural pathways being made.
yes.
The way to say that. So I'd like to think of baby time and taking naps as a really good thing that we can embrace. It's a
Yeah.
kindness.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
And actually, it's a time of, that's why the sunnah is to, before you sleep, make a shahada and pray. And then, if, however, you sleep, that's how, like in our sleep, we will be processing that. And
Yeah.
we wake up with that awareness. Subhanallah. So,
Yes.
because it's not all work that is done with will. Once we set our choice, it's like setting a train on a railway, and it's done unto us, even in our sleep.
Yes. Yes. It can be a continual process, like the seed starting to grow in the deep earth, and we don't see what's happening, but there's
exactly
life awakening.
It's like we put the seeds, and then that's it.
That's it.
We wait for them to grow.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Actually, this also is something that's really refreshing to hear, because like Maha was saying, it seems very effortful, and maybe that effort is what, you know, seems from an outer perspective exhausting. But the good news is, and this is such a mercy, like Selsan was saying, is that once you, and repeating what Amina and Yamina just said, once we plant the seed and nourish it, or once we dedicate the time to the awareness muscle, or this capacity of seeing through the breathing and watching, being the watcher and the noticer, and we dedicate time, we find this, and I like the word that he used, something Rabbani.
Yeah.
What was it?
Rabbani, translated as Dominical, but most people said they didn't understand it. So you can say divine.
Like a divine guide with you, doing through you. And then it fades away, and then the ego muscle starts taking over again. But then when you dedicate a little bit more time, you find the Rabbani presence reminding you, and you start hearing it just a little bit louder. And so there's this beautiful conversation happening when we tune in. And then I guess we hear the voice, that Rabbani guide, louder and louder, like slightly bringing our attention. And we, you know, the more that, like Dr. Yamina says, we pay attention to it and follow it and spend time with it and dedicate time, the more, inshallah, it'll become louder and louder. That's all.
Yeah, inshallah. But it's only, it's hard in the beginning, but that's not only for this. Anything new is hard in the beginning. And but the more we practice it, the easier it becomes. What we need to understand, and what this sixth word is emphasizing, is that when we follow this path, there are lots of benefit. When we don't, there are lots of losses. This we need to repeat. I feel the need to repeat it again and again for myself. Don't think that you're only letting go of the benefits. No. The benefits look to eternity, and the losses look to eternity. What is at stake is our eternal future. Here and now, but more so the eternal future. And the here and now is also important, because someone will say, I don't care about the future. I don't even know if there is a future. But all the implications do have consequences here and now. The quality of our life, the meaning and purpose of our life totally changes. So, inshallah, let's stop here today, and then we can carry on with the fourth benefit, inshallah, next week. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. This last two ayahs, it's from Surah Al-An'am 162 and 163. It says, behold, my prayer and all my acts of worship and my living and my dying are for God only, the sustainer of all the worlds. He has no partner. This I am commended, and I am the first of those who submit. Al-Muslimin, those who surrender. Ameen. Thank you, inshallah. See you next week, inshallah, if God wills. And may you all stay well in his protection, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Yamina. Can I have a request?
Alaikum salam. Go ahead, please.
Yamina, I love seeing your face. I love this beautiful imagery that you have for us, but I prefer seeing you personally. We see you once a week, Yamina, like, you know, so please.